This is part 6, fraction division story problems. Make sure you have your guided notes for part 6 in front of you before you continue with this video. Okay, story problems, like visual representations, are another way to model arithmetic computation. Story problems present a problem in context, help students make real-world connections, and build conceptual understanding. So fraction division stories ask us how many of the dividend can go into the divisor or how much of the dividend can go into the divisor. Remember, it depends on which number is larger. If your dividend is larger, you're asking how many, and if your divisor is larger, you're asking how much. So here's an example. Juliet is baking cookies. The recipe calls for 1/4 cup of flour. Juliet has 3/4 cup of flour. How many batches of cookies can she bake? We are looking at division of a larger number, 3/4, by a smaller number, 1/4. How many 1/4 can go into 3/4? So when you compute, you find the answer is 3. Again, that answer follows our direction of effects rule. If you remember, when we divide two proper fractions, the quotient should be bigger than that dividend, and 3 is bigger than 3/4. So if we look at a visual representation, we want to know how many 1/4 can go into 3/4. If we mark off 3/4, then we divide the line into fourths, which we've already done, to find out how many 1/4 can go into 3/4. 1, 2, 3. The answer is 3. 3 1/4 can go into 3/4. Here's another example. The beach is eroding 3/4 of a mile every century. What fraction of a century will it take for the beach to erode half a mile? Okay, here we're looking at a smaller number, 1/2, divided by a larger number, 3/4. How much of 3/4 can go into 1/2? The computation tells us our answer is 2/3 of a century, or about 66 years. So it'll take 2/3 of a century for the beach to erode a half mile. We see we are dividing 1/2 by 3/4. So here's 1/2 divided by 3/4. We see our answer is 2/3, 2 overlapping parts out of 3 shaded parts for our answer, our quotient, 2/3. Here's another example. Hannibal is on a training run. He drinks 1/8 liter of water every mile. After how many miles will he finish 3/4 liter of water? We are dividing a larger number, 3/4, by a smaller number, 1/8. How many 1/8 can go into 3/4? Our answer is 6. 6 1/8 can go into 3/4. Hannibal will run 6 miles by the time he finishes 3/4 liter of water. So again, how many eighths can go into 3/4? We mark off 3/4, then split the number line into eighths and count up how many 1/8 can go into 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Quotient is 6. And another example. Natasha has 1/6 gallon of paint. To paint her entire room, she would need 5/12 gallon of paint. How much of her room can she paint with the amount of paint that she has? Here we're looking at a smaller number, 1/6, divided by a larger number, 5/12. How much of 5/12 can go into 1/6? So we find a quotient of 2/5. We answer Natasha can paint 2/5 of her room. We're starting out with 1/6. We want to know how much of 5/12 can go into 1/6. And we see of our shaded area, we've got 2 spots overlapping out of 5 for 2/5. Okay, you're going to try one on your own. You're going to go to number 1 on your guided notes for this session, and you're going to write a fraction division story problem. You're going to use the problem 1/3 divided by 5/6, and you're going to write a story to model that. Remember, this problem is asking us to divide a smaller number, 1/3, by a larger number, 5/6. So it's asking us how much of 5/6 can go into 1/3. Here's 1/3. How much of 1/6 can go in there? 2/5. Okay, so pause here. Try to write your own story problem. Remember, we're looking for how much of 5/6 can go into 1/3 in the story situation, and then come back to look at some possible examples. Okay, here are some possible stories. This problem asks us to divide a smaller number, 1/3, by a larger number, 5/6, so it's asking us to find how much of 5/6 can go into 1/3. One possible story: Octavia has walked 1/3 of a mile to the bus stop. The bus stop is 5/6 miles away. How much of the walk has Octavia completed? She's completed 2/5 of the walk to the bus stop. Another possible story: Stormy owns 5/6 acres of farming land. She has enough seed to plant 1/3 acre. How much of her land can she plant? She can plant 2/5 of her land. Alejandra fed her dog 5-6 pounds of food. Her dog ate 1/3 of what Alejandra put out. How much of the food did the dog eat? The dog ate 2/5 of the food. All right, next we're going to try it out with a problem in which we're being asked how many. So a problem where we're dividing a larger number by a smaller number. Number 2 on your guided note sheet, you're going to write a story problem to model the fraction division 4/5 divided by 1/10. And again, this is division of a larger number by a smaller number. So we're asking to find how many 1/10 can go into 4/5. If we've got 4/5, we want to know how many tenths can go in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 1/10 can go into 4/5. Pause here, draft a story, and then come back to see some possible answers. Okay, here's the first possible answer. Zora made a playlist that played for 4/5 of an hour. Each song on the playlist was 1/10 of an hour long. How many songs were on the playlist? There were 8 songs on the playlist. JB's laptop has 4/5 battery life. The laptop uses 1/10 battery life every hour. How many hours can JB use his laptop before it dies? He can use his laptop for 8 more hours. And a final example. Michelle made 4/5 pounds of candy. She plans to fill gift bags with 1/10 pound of candy each. How many gift bags of candy will Michelle be able to make? Michelle will be able to fill 8 gift bags. So these example stories may look a lot different from the story that you wrote, but they should be similar in structure. You're asking how many or how much of one fraction can go into another. In summary, we learned in the division sessions about the direction of effects. We learned that the quotient of 2 improper fractions, fractions greater than 1, will be less than the dividend, and that the quotient of 2 proper fractions, fractions less than 1, will be greater than the dividend. If you divide a larger number by a smaller number, you're asking conceptually how many of the divisor can go into the dividend. And if you're dividing a smaller number by a larger number, you're asking how much of the divisor can go into the dividend. And in these sessions, we learn to create visual representations and story problems to model fraction division. That's a typo there, fraction division. In wrapping up, you're going to fill out one last self-efficacy scale at number 3 on your guided notes form. and you're going to rate how confident you feel in your knowledge about the direction of effects for fraction division, and how confident you feel in your ability to create visual representations and story problems to model fraction division.